Hello, everyone. I am with someone I am so grateful is doing an interview today, is going to talk to us today. I am with Bernadine. Bernadine was Chad and Tammy Daybell's neighbor. Bernadine is actually a lot of things, and I'll let her introduce, but that point is fascinating. And you no longer live in Rexburg, but you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of experience about that neighborhood, these beliefs. Why don't you share a little bit about who you are and how you're processing everything, and then we'll
Okay,
dig in.
thanks. Thanks, Lauren, for having me. I lived where Chad's brother lives now. So I
Okay.
lived right next door to Eldon, and at that time, somebody else lived in
Eldon
the home,
Clawson, Chad's
Eldon
neighbor who
Clawson.
passed away. Okay.
Yeah, and Chad and them hadn't moved there yet. Then I moved away, and I moved back, and I lived on the same street as Chad. And
Mm.
so then my kids went to school with Chad's and Tammy's kids. Okay.
Wow.
So I had seen Chad at school events. We never had a conversation. I'd seen Tammy at the library, hi, kind of knew would recognize each other. But my big connection was with my kids uh, uh, and their kids.
So you
Okay.
knew their
They,
kids well.
I knew the youngest one, Mark, very well. He served his mission in South Africa,
Okay.
but my kids were good friends with their kids. They did drama together. My kids would go over there for bonfires. My my
Bonfires.
second,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, my third youngest and Leah, their daughter, were mates together with I think it was speech and debate that
Oh,
they were paired up. And
classmates. Yeah, partners.
yeah. And so, but my youngest, he's on a mission now in your area. He was actually just transferred yesterday back to Warm Springs in Henderson.
I was always looking for him, but yeah, I
Yeah.
never met him.
So
Yeah.
that's okay. So he and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, and he said, or a few months ago, and he said the sickest part for him is that he sat at that uh, fire pit
The
with
bonfire pit.
the
Yeah, the fire
kids,
pit.
yeah. And he says, obviously that was pre, I believe, anything happening, but it just made him sick, you know. And and so as far as me, how am I doing that now with all of us? We're in the truck, we drive, 11 hours a day. So a lot of
Yeah,
YouTube,
you're at work right now, taking a break,
yeah.
saying, "Hey, was this a good time, Lauren?" So I jumped on. Yes.
And so we get to listen to a lot of this, and my interest with it has been I was baptized when I was 9 years old. Okay.
Okay. And where are you
And
from
so
originally?
I'm originally from Rhodesia, which
Okay.
is now Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And it kind of went through a Ukraine experience a little, the bombing, the
Mhm.
Russians came in, did whatever, and we fled
Yeah.
one night to South Africa. We lived on a beach. We were able to get an apartment, and the man that gave us the free apartment was Mormon. And
Oh,
so 3 weeks later, we were baptized into the church, and it changed our lives very dramatically, very, very dramatically. So for me as a little kid, it was a lifeline away
mhm.
from my dad's drinking, all the garbage that was going on in our lives. It became a lifeline for us,
Yeah.
for me as a kid.
And you were in
And
South Africa at this point.
yeah, and then I moved over here when I was 18 and went to Rick's College
Ah.
and then went to BYU. And so a lot,
And for those wondering, Rick's College is now BYU Idaho. They switched the name. So you went to Rexburg
yes,
to school at
right.
Rick. Okay.
Yeah. And so I've lived up there mostly, and then I was in Utah for 10 years, and then
Okay.
back up to Idaho again, and that time I lived in Rexburg mostly.
Okay. That was a helpful explanation. So going back to what you were saying though, your LDS, you were talking to your son who is now on a mission and how it's so hard for him. And then you said you were about to say the hardest thing for you before I interrupted to get your background a bit, or what you've been
Right.
processing on the road as you say you travel for work.
Is there is the Mormon Kool-Aid, the LDS Kool-Aid, and there is the Chad Daybell, Julie Rowe Kool-Aid. Okay.
Okay. Hmm.
And I feel like when the two came together, it was like perfect ingredients to create this horrible bomb, you know?
Hmm.
Now, coming from Rhodesia and being on food rations and terrible things, war trauma in Rhodesia, okay? I am a natural. One of the things that I liked about the LDS Church was plan for disasters in your life, whether it be a political disaster or not having a job or whatever. So I've always been very self sufficient. Even now, I have 9 children and a lot of grandchildren. And so I'm always making sure, okay, if they don't have, I want to make sure that I have for them so that we're all safe because I know what it's like to suddenly not have, okay, and
Hmm.
be dependent on whoever and not be able to get by.
Yeah.
And so that part of the church attracted me a lot because there wasn't anybody else. I was Methodist before, by the way, who really talked about that.
That makes sense.
But yeah, but I also, my mom got into the Julie Rose stuff. Sorry, noisy trucks. My mom got into the Julie Rose stuff and she brought me the books and I read probably the first maybe 4 or 5 pages and I was just like, man, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with this person, you know, like that was my, but at the same time, as I've listened to everything that you have and the other YouTubers have talked about Julie Rowe, there's things I recognize. And the same thing with Lori Daybell, Vallow, whatever her name is you know, the end of time stuff, the stuff we taught, there's a second coming, there's all these catastrophes and things coming. You know, there's a lot of these things that you recognize and go, okay, if you go too much of this and too much of that, you're creating this a monster, you know,
Right.
and that's what I see that they happen. And I just got the Julie Rowe book, her biography, and I
Hmm.
read that. And when I was reading through her book, some of the things that were really intriguing to me were similarities
Hmm.
between, because she was an army brat. Okay, so a lot of traveling, a lot of whatever. I was
And you read
also
this really quickly. You read this recently, everyone, because what I
right,
love about Bernadine is just how curious she is, and this crime in with people you knew and the religion you know has been something you've been really processing things with
right.
and trying to understand. So I just wanted to explain why you're reading her book. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, because I'm somebody who always has to try and understand. Now, why would somebody really do that?
Hmm.
Okay, I don't understand why somebody would think that way, and then I have to try and understand. And the thing when I was reading her book, and Lauren, if you haven't read it, I'll mail mine to you.
Thank you.
It,
Thank you.
it
You know what? We had it because I did read part of it. And so I'm now searching for it because I realized
okay,
I have a bigger interest in finishing it now. But if
yeah,
I can't
yeah,
find it, I'll let you know. So thank you.
okay.
Then we
Is
don't buy
there?
another.
Yeah, I know, I know. When I was buying it online, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna do it. But is there's things that I believe that when she talks about, she hints at sexual abuse as a child.
Okay.
And I feel like there are things that come with that allow you to kind of measure the temperature in a room, if you want to speak. Okay.
Mhm.
And I feel like for some people it's more than other people. And she calls herself a clairvoyant. I feel like whatever happened to her as a kid that she got into her head so much, the voices that she hears, she calls them constant, right? And I
Mhm.
look at the LDS side of it and we talk about being led by the spirit, right? And then you combine those two things and it's the spirit's telling me to do everything. Well, one of the things we know is to check in, okay, are we being told to do something right or something wrong? Instead of interpret everything as right, you know and
Right.
so going through her book and hearing these parallels. Okay, I understand this. As a child, this happened to me. I just um I tried to read the book from a place of compassion rather than just coming right off and going, okay, this chick's nutsoid, like I did with the
You were
first book.
trying to stand back. I do the same thing. I try to stand back and really listen to understand, right?
Yeah,
Before, like, try
yeah,
to get rid of as much bias as I can before delving into something. Right.
right, right. But having lived in Rexburg, and and there's so much secrecy in Rexburg.
Okay.
There's some things would happen. A girl would be raped at school and at college, and nobody would hear about it. Okay, and it combine it with the sort of thing like the culture, um, the I don't want to call it conspiracy culture, but this um, somebody's going to come after our food storage. Somebody's going to come after our um, I don't want to say anti-government because that's not exactly how they are in Rexburg, but a
Okay.
suspicion. Okay, I feel like it's a perfect breeding ground for what happened with them.
Okay. To clarify Rexburg, because it is interesting to hear this take. I'm really interested in this. Would you call it maybe like an us versus them mentality too, a little bit, when you say they're suspicious and think other
Yeah,
people are going to do something?
yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
think that there's a lot of that. And I understand there's different groups and so on. And I never got involved with the whole Julie Rowe. I know that there were groups like they had I was actually running the museum in Rexburg beneath the tabernacle where they had their
Oh.
meeting
That
upstairs.
one big
And that,
meeting, yeah.
right. And that's why I've said, I know that building doesn't seat more than 900 people. But I didn't
Oh,
go to that, yeah, but I knew people that went to it. My mom got involved with emotion code. And this
okay.
is one of the things I wanted to talk about because I so in 2010 I hurt my back, could not get it fixed, and I met a man who did energy healing, and he was a theta healer. Okay, and theta healers, the Vienna Daybell is the lady that started that, wrote the books.
What's her name
They're
again?
Vienna, Vianna Stibal. She started this theta healing group, and she was LDS and she'd left the church. And what it is the mind body connection. So whatever, say for instance, I get a kidney infection, okay, and you go into beliefs, and you have a kidney infection because you're, excuse the word, ticked off, but use a different
Yeah,
word
absolutely.
than somebody else, right? So if you resolve your issues, the kidney infection will go away. That's pretty much a very uh,
Basic
narrowed,
summary.
yeah, very basic summary. I took all her classes and I became a teacher for theta healing.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I was fascinated with this. It made sense to me. I'm a very much a nature person, herbalist. And so my degree was in ethnobotany. So the whole natural side of things just really appealed to me. Okay. But I noticed a lot, and I actually stopped being involved with theta healing a few years later because people started getting really weird.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't stand it. It was a very egotistical environment. Like, I healed this person, I healed that person, kind of a mentality, and I didn't like it. Okay. I felt like anything um, that there, scientifically, I could say, okay, you could meditate yourself into a brainwave which is theta, right? That you could do yourself good. But when you decided that you could heal other people, that you were crossing a line. Okay. And then, of course, I was also married to a doctor. So and he was, like you
Oh,
said, a narcissist, not a good person.
we've moved on
And
from him, so
so,
that's good. Yeah.
yeah. and, and so I could also understand reading Julie's books, okay, the attraction to the energy healing stuff. Okay.
Okay.
But along with this energy healing stuff was a lot of and I don't know, like my mom gave me the emotion code book, but I never read it. And but it sounded like there was some similarities to the theta healing stuff. And at the time, I warned my mom, said, "You don't want to get involved with this. You know, this is going down and this pathway that there was a lot of assumption. I thought of information like, okay, we know that the Middle Eastern people believe in uh, what do you call it? The past life stuff. They have a different word for it.
Reincarnation. Yeah.
Reincarnation. But in theta healing as well, they talked about having lived before. Okay,
Oh, okay.
having had these past lives. That if you had a feeling about something, perhaps you were, maybe you like Indian food, so maybe you lived in India in a past life. Or and I had a real hard time with that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so is this
but
was this in emotion code? Is this taught by
this
Viana
was
too?
in this is in theta healing. This is taught by Vienna. Yeah,
God,
right,
okay. Mhm.
right. And so for me, that didn't jive. It didn't make sense. Okay. Now, in when I was reading Julie Rowe's book, she talks about like being a child and going into a building and enjoying or reading a book and enjoying the stories of Joan of Arc, for instance. Okay. Then later, when she gets involved in motion code, I don't know if she comes out and says it or intimates that she was Joan of Arc.
She has
You
said
know,
that. Yeah,
right.
right.
And so you see this kind of metamorphosis of thinking based on these other life experiences. And that's why I'm saying I could understand looking at my path, how I could have chosen that path
Right.
and said, this. You know, part of the emotion code and theta healing is that you can meditate to be able to see the future.
Hmm.
You can access what they call the Akashic records, AKASH Akashic records, and see what's going to happen. Okay. And so, and then you go to the LDS side of it, it doesn't jive with the LDS side. So I got to a place, I actually had left the church for quite a few years because of several reasons. And during this time, I did a lot of study for myself. What do I actually believe? You know,
Mhm.
about all of this stuff. And for me, I decided that the emotion code and the theta healing stuff was taking me away from a peace
Okay.
that I couldn't get thinking that way.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And but at the same time, the scary religious side for me too was, and this wasn't any great spiritual experience. I have a child in Indiana. Reed has one moving to Miami, and so we decided to buy land in the heartland, buy trees because I love trees, which is Missouri. So we had just bought our land, and somebody on one of the groups said, Laurie Vallow was in Missouri. It's when the Missouri information broke, and I was like, "Oh hell no! Are you kidding
And
me?"
Mark Means is there now. We're all going. Everyone's going to
I
Missouri.
know. I'm gonna go knock on his door and ask him if he has his food storage. But you know, I was just like, I said to Reed, "This just makes me sick. I'm just sick. This is horrible."
Knock on Mark
You
Means'
know?
door and get the scoop and let us know. That's what you.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
So, so it's very interesting to me watching this because I see, like listening to Anna, I loved listening to Anna. I loved listening to Girl on Fire because I see it's a very slippery slope and it fills in blanks that maybe people don't have questions for. It's like, well, or like in Julie's case, I reading a lot of, she was rejected a lot as a child,
Mm.
a lot of moving, a lot of, she says a lot, I was bizarre, I was strange. She talks about her first near death experience. I think she was 5 or 6 years old when she had her tonsils out.
Okay.
And yeah, and She she talks about when her husband, she first told her husband about her near death experience when she was in her maybe early 30s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I've lost my wife. This woman's gone away. I posted one of the pages on that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
the True Crime Underground Lori Daybell cult mom Facebook group. I did see this post. It was interesting
yeah, and
for
she
you.
was devastated that he didn't believe her. And, over the last couple of years, it seems like every time she catches wind that somebody didn't believe her or is making fun of one of her sessions or whatever, she'll come out and she'll actually say, she'll defend herself like crazy. You can tell that's a real button for her, not
Mhm.
being believed and trying to prove that she's not a liar.
Right.
Right.
And not being rejected. I want to point out one
Right.
story that I do remember from her book when I read it months ago. That there was, when she was a young child, she had in elementary school, so we're talking, I think, elementary school crush. She liked a boy. It might have been like fifth or sixth grade. So, it was at the time where you start
Hmm.
liking boys. And she thought that she was his one and only. And then they went to a roller skating rink and he was holding hands with another girl. And it really affected her. I mean, so much so, clearly it did. She's writing about it in her,
Hmm. Yeah.
autobiography. But then she
Right.
said at that point she knew she would never settle for like a guy who like had his eyes on another woman or something. But it was this really profound moment. So I just want to say I agree with you about the stories of rejection. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and control too, And I was also, and I don't mind saying this because I feel like it's an open conversation people can have. I was also sexually abused as a child, and so in my own therapy, I've learned a lot about control. How
Mhm.
important it is for a sex abuse victim to have control.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, and her story, it sounds like I say, she intimates that these things happened to her when she's a kid. um she's always very taken up with sexual crime and that kind of thing, but then as an adult she's raped. Okay, before she gets married she's dating a guy and she's raped, and she writes about
Oh.
this in this book. Yeah, devastating, right? And I think that when you don't deal with things properly, that control of men becomes survival, right?
Yes.
And retribution and way to deal with resentment and all that stuff. So when I listen to like Girl on Fire and Anna and the husband thing, oh yeah, I can see how that would happen,
Right.
just
That's a
this.
very interesting insight you have there into her.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. But and I know that this is kind of away from the neighbor thing, the Chad and Eldon neighbor stuff,
Eldon
but
Clawson, again, a neighbor who helped Chad with insurance, life insurance, and died from a lung clot,
right,
right?
yeah,
And a
yeah,
pulmonary embolism. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
and I'm just like, when I first so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Eldon, when the first day we went out and looked at the land. Okay, this is the doctor. We went out to
Your
look at the
husband, the
land.
doctor, and you're looking at land where?
In right next door to Eldon.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
there were two parcels of land. They're both about 6 acres each.
Okay.
And so we went out to look at this land, and Eldon and his wife came right over with another neighbor. Oh, they tried to talk us out of buying that land. They did not want us buying this land. We liked it. We ended up buying it, but it became a nightmare. They were literally the neighbors from hell. We had, I told you we were self-sufficient, so we'd butcher sheep and pigs and whatever. We had about three of those huge chest freezers, and food would be missing, like a lot of food. And then we got talking to like the neighbor across the street. Her name was Tammy also, and we were talking, and she'd been sitting in her living room on a Sunday, and in Eldon walked in the front door. Everybody's at church during those hours, right? And she
Right.
was homesick, and he walked in the door and she says, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, I was just, I can't remember what he came to check. He needed a shovel. I need a shovel. And she's like, and you came in the house, you know? So anyway, then neighbors started talking and putting the stories together. And I believe Patsy follows True Crime Underground also. Patsy Calloway, she owns the land across the street from Eldon as well. So we were friends. And
Okay.
he was also taking from their freezer, and the neighbors talking. Many people were losing food and things. So they actually ended up giving him a calling in church on a Sunday that would keep him at church because he would help himself. But he did other creepy things too. Like I'd be out milking a cow and I'd get a feeling like somebody is watching me, and I turn around, he'd be 3 feet away, just standing right there. Or another time, we lived in a one-room cabin. We were waiting to build a house, and I'd left the door open, and he had stepped in the door. He was in the doorway. I had my back to the door, so he we had a lot of problems with Eldon. So one of the reasons we gave up the property, the one piece was bank owned, the other piece we're buying directly from the owner of the property because they were in a dispute with Eldon over the north fence on the property, and he had gone and moved it 40 feet, which was not a good thing for me. I
Right.
When the
Yeah, that's
cops
their
came out,
property.
yeah, when the cops came out, they were Fremont County cops. I called them terrorists. This is like some maybe war trauma. No, but I mean, it was a very, very triggering, upsetting thing for me, and we could not resolve the fence thing with them. So what we did is we went to the owners and said we're walking away. And at that point, I think we'd paid them about 5 years worth of money for that property. So we lost a lot of money, you know
Yeah.
and moved back to Island Park and opened up a restaurant. And then after a couple of years, moved back
Beautiful area.
down. Yeah, it's beautiful. There where Chad and Tammy were. I'll tell you one interesting thing. Tammy had runner ducks, and I had runner ducks. I had 30 of them, and we had a canal that ran past our place, and then it turned into a creek and went past her place. Like an offshoot. So the ducks would swim back and forth, my ducks and her ducks. These runner ducks on the canal, and I loved that about her. That she loved the runner ducks also because they're just
So you guys
different,
had that connection. I know you weren't like the closest of friends, but did that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
warm both of your hearts a bit as neighbors?
yeah, it did. And, and she, when I would run into her, like at the school, because, we had all these kids going to the same schools, right?
And that they were
Always,
friends, right?
yeah, yeah, just kind, good lady, I didn't even know Chad was a writer.
Hmm.
I didn't know that about him at all, but I wasn't like, that's when I was not active in the church anymore.
Okay.
And yeah, and so I think I missed out on a lot of that stuff, and I'm grateful that I did
Yeah.
because like I said, I can see how easily you could get swept in. And I will give you another tidbit. I have a son who's an officer, a deputy in a different town nearby.
Okay.
When all this stuff started falling apart in like March, when they arrested Laurie in
Hawaii.
Hawaii. He
So
said to
2020, March
me,
2020. Hmm.
right, and then into, I think it was that fall. It could have been that spring. I'm trying to remember when he told me. He was a school resource officer. He says people upped and were leaving, like overnight. People were leaving. And he said that he would get a call and say, this child hasn't been in class for a few days. And then he'd go and have a look, and they would have just up and left their house. you
What?
know and so yeah, and so he said to me, he goes, Mom, he says, this involves so many people, possibly thousands of people. He says, and we wonder if there's more bodies than these ones that they're focusing on you
Where
know
were people going? Why were they leaving?
I think that they were spooked that Chad and Laurie, because they were Chad and Laurie followers and part of
Followers.
the whole Eric Smith thing and the whole Julie Rowe thing. The Christopher Parrott is actually in this town where my son lives and
Okay.
works. And I think that is it Christopher Parrott who's there, honey, or James and Nancy Rigby? They live. It's in the Rigby area. Anyway,
Rigby area,
it's either
Rigby,
Christopher
Idaho.
Parrott or James and Nancy. Yeah, and these people were. He says it was like cockroaches shining a light on cockroaches. People were scattering, leaving because so many people had moved up there to be around Chad.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
and
I mean, Melanie,
and
we know that Melanie Gibb and everyone was looking at land there in Rexburg.
right,
David
yeah,
Warwick, right. Mike
right,
and Nancy James had
and
moved up
and,
there. Yeah.
and I'd heard through the telephone wire that people had talked about tent cities and Rexburg being the only place standing, and this is actually one of the reasons I moved away too, is I felt like there was this we're kind of better than a lot of places. Like there's more wickedness in Salt Lake, for instance. So there's,
Right.
these are like the die-hard true blues up here that are trying to do the right thing, and I'm not saying all Mormons up there either, but there was just a lot of, I think one of the things that bothered me is a lot of people made adjustments for people, which is very Rexburg,
Okay.
yeah.
What do you mean by adjustments?
Okay, I'll give you an example. There's a doctor in town who's friends with my ex-husband who beat his wife. He almost killed her. Her hair was her name was Becky Larson. You can read the news story. I think he spent 2 months in jail. He's an orthopod up there. And Mike Larson, he almost killed his wife. I was friends with him and Becky. When I saw Becky, I didn't know how she was still alive. He had beat her so badly. He got away with it. He still practices medicine. Okay?
What?
Yeah. My husband, he went crazy in surgery one day and he threatened. I had found out some horrible things and we'd been married a week and I wanted to call it quits. I was like, I can't do this. The things that he's being accused of are horrible. So before work that morning, we talked about I don't think I can do this. And he went into work to do surgery as an anesthesiologist. And he wrote a suicide note, and put it in the drawer. A nurse found it and they wanted to get him medical help, so he threatened to shoot them. He didn't have a gun with him. He threatened to shoot them in the OR. So they
Whoa.
put the hospital on lockdown. Okay.
This has got to bring back your war trauma too. My goodness.
Oh yeah. And so by the end of the day, I was visiting a behavioral health hospital trying to figure out what the heck was going on, and that was like shoved under the rug, I had a
And then
daughter who
he kept his
yep,
license and just kept practicing after that,
kept,
even though he
yep,
threatened to shoot colleagues.
right, yep. They didn't want him doing anesthesia at the hospital anymore, but he carried on practicing medicine. Okay, so he opened up a private practice. My daughter, she was 14, was sexually abused by the school counselor. We just actually finished. It took 6 years of the police department lost her videoed interview twice in
What?
Rexburg.
Oh,
Yeah.
the
So
chills. Oh
yeah.
my
So that's what I
God.
say. Rexburg. To me, I look at this and I'm like, interesting that the light is being shone on Rexburg for this Laurie and Chad thing, where garbage has gone on there for so many years, you know?
In other words, Chad and Lori are just the surface.
Yep. It doesn't surprise me that people say, how could this happen? In Rexburg, easy. You know, in Rexburg, I can see how easily this could happen. As far as I have a very, very, very dear friend whose son was divorced. The mother committed suicide. Her oldest son had sexually abused the youngest daughter from when she was 5 years old for years. So he went to jail for a couple of years. Instead of giving the father, who had a straight record, good man, the son, because the family knew the judge and blah, 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 the 14-year-old son was given to his older brother who had sexually abused the 5-year-old. It's just up there. I feel like law, it's kind of like watching the Murtaugh thing where everybody knows everybody and so they get away with stuff. The church will hide stuff. This counselor who sexually abused my daughter all through school, he was excommunicated from the church for a year, didn't ever serve jail time, didn't, now there's been a
Did he
financial
remain a school
settlement.
counselor, or is he done?
No, they decided he wasn't going to be a school counselor anymore, so he went to a college in Idaho Falls and taught there. The community came up against my family and said, well, you know what? She was 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. This was consensual, and we're calling it an affair. And still, she lives in Rexburg, and that is kind of the mindset, and it is just shocking to me. It blows me away what gets shoved under the rug up there, because it's just corrupt, and so
So
I'm
this
not
idea that it's
surprised.
this pure, clean town where no crime ever happens, that's not,
No. I'm
no,
sure
that's
it's
not it.
less than Chicago, but you know what I mean? I'm sure it's less than some places, but I think that a lot of things are just shoved under the rug,
I
you
know what
know?
you mean though, right? I lived in a similar sort of town with the same feel. It wasn't there. And I do know what you mean when you say you were kind of trying to say like everyone knows everyone and they don't abide by the law. I remember actually a sheriff saying to me once, "We do what we do here. Like this is
Mhm.
our like stop," because I was like, "Well, that's not
Yeah.
the way the state,
Yeah.
is out." I was questioning like, "Well, the state says A, B, C, D." It was actually it was specifically about assessing sex offenders, and their response
Right.
was, "We do things our way here," and I was saying, "Well, the state laws are this, and well, we do things our way here." So kind of like
Right.
that, would you say? Would that be a
Yeah.
similar?
Yeah, I would say it depends on how it's going to affect the church
And when you say
and
the church in Rexburg or the church as a whole?
the church in Rexburg, because I
Okay.
feel like there were a lot of people who knew exactly what was going on. Stake presidents' wives, stake presidency, people who, the counselors, normally there's like this hierarchy of leaders, right? There is no way people didn't know that a lot of this stuff was going on, especially with um, Judy Rowe was pretty public. Her and Eric Smith were pretty darn public on YouTube and everything about what they believed.
Yeah,
Okay.
there were so many people. I think
Yeah.
actually sometimes I just don't get interviews with people because as you point out, like the shame, the secrecy, not wanting to
Right.
be involved, people
The
looking the other
embarrassment.
way, the
Yeah.
embarrassment. And Girl on
Yeah.
Fire talked a lot about that. She said she
Right.
was speaking so that because she hoped other people would come
Right.
forward rather than
Right.
hide from this truth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. And there's people that I do wish that would come forward, that have their own stories. But I was told that Eric Smith had actually gone to a woman at a get together at somebody's house and said, you're supposed to be my wife, you know, and her husband was like, what, and she's like, that's it, we're leaving. That was it. They cut him off. So there's a lot of these little, I don't know if they're apocryphal, if they're true, if they're, but the person that told me is pretty dang believable,
Mhm.
where I think there was so much of this nonsense going on. And they were creating, I think, a situation that they thought things were going to fall apart so quickly that they were going to be the last ones standing with the truth. Kind of like Laurie did, let's go to Hawaii. Things are going to go nutsoid, and then we can just go back and We're not going to
Right.
get caught.
Rexburg will just keep protecting us, and it's the
Right.
promised land, and
Right.
people trust us there. Yeah, I remember before the children were found, how many people defended him online too.
Yeah.
Also, I want to point out though something. People will say, "I know people," and Chad would never do this. To that point, I want to say, if to anyone that says, "Oh, I can tell whether a person is good or not," no, you can't. And when
No.
you finally admit that, you'll be able to process things and evidence a lot better.
And even this, like all the gag orders or whatever they're calling them, where the documents are sealed, I get why they're doing that. Fine. I get why they're telling us they're doing that. But then there's this part of me that goes, yep, that sounds like Fremont County and Rexburg, because you know what? They've got to hide stuff. They've got to hide as much as they can. Right. And I think that kind of thing perpetuates the garbage. My daughter, for instance, when she couldn't get anybody to listen to her about the sexual abuse, she came up with these cards that she has a Instagram, and they are affirmation cards for sexual abuse survivors. And she became as loud as she could, and it made other people come out of the woodwork and talk about their trauma. And I think it's the same thing, is if they would normalize, like you do, talking about this, and people could see, you know what, we can talk about this. Somebody else's opinion of Rexburg is going to be totally different than mine, I'll guarantee it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But if then more people would feel like, okay, maybe I can speak about this and my situation with this. And like, I sent you that book that my ex-husband wrote, and
A near-death experience book written by your ex-husband.
ex-husband. Yeah. So we were scuba diving, and he had a near-death experience. And when he had read all the Julie Rose stuff. There was another woman, Embraced by the Light. Oh gosh, what was her name?
Is that Sarah
Anyway, no.
Mennett? I know Sarah Mennett wrote the book.
Oh, anyway, the book is Edie. Her last name's Edie,
Okay.
Edie, I think. Anyway, she'd written a couple of books. It seems like one book's successful, and then they remember more, and then write another one. Then they remember, like this kind of a thing, the Julie Rose style,
Mhm.
And he read all these, and then he wrote his book. And so I'm suspicious of near-death experience books. Okay, I don't disbelieve that some people have these experiences, but I do believe that if God's going to speak to you, that it's for you. It's not for you to tell everybody else, right?
Right.
It's a private thing, because so many things are open to interpretation. I look at a war a totally different way than the average American does, because of what I went through as a kid, right?
Absolutely.
So
Right.
I can't expect Americans to have the same, oh my gosh, I'm going to store food and I'm going to dig a pit and I'm going to hide it in there, because if somebody comes and puts this on my property, I want to know that I mean, like bizarre
Right. You
stuff.
can't
I have a
expect
bizarre,
them to
no,
understand the reason you do things, and everyone has
right.
different experiences in life. Right.
Right. And so he wrote this book, and I read probably the first half of it, and I was just like, how can you have met Jesus and then he was very physically abusive, okay? And do the things that you do if you've been in the presence of God. You look at the Chad and Lori thing, it's like, okay, how could you be who you say you are, or had these experiences genuinely, and then kill two children, and whoever knows how, we don't even know who else was, the Brandon and Alex and um Lori's Joe Ryan, because I think she killed
Right.
him.
Mhm.
All this stuff. How do you justify the whole Nephi thing? Just absolute nonsense. I don't believe that I don't, believe that that's justification. Do you know what I
Nephi
mean?
Laban story, that the infamous quote Zulema wrote in a text to her friend Julie, not Julie Rowe. I know who the other Julie is. That it was a Nephi and Laban ending. It's a really damning text, because if you understand the story in the Book of Mormon, Nephi kills Laban, beheads him because he has some records, some scriptures that his people need. And the famous scripture, it's better for one man to perish than a nation dwindle in unbelief. So that is that
Right.
story. So when she says it was a Nephi and Laban ending, it's very clear that that ending ends with Nephi beheading Laban. Go ahead.
Laban.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and as far as that too, I feel like these groups, like, okay, theta healing and all that again. Okay, they talk about the earth, the wind, fire, and water. Okay, those are elements that pagans and witches, and I identify more as a witch than a Mormon, just so you know. That's a whole nother conversation, not in a dark way. It's the herbalist side of me, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I feel like they I just lost my train of thought. Oh, the earth, wind, and fire and stuff. They take all this stuff, and I don't know if they're Googling things, or, oh, somebody comes in and goes, you know what, I think we can make it stronger because we add this and this and this in, or we add, you know, uh, um, the weather thing in, or the earthquakes, or it just seemed, it was so insulting for me to read that and have this connection with earth like I do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and read that and go, oh my gosh, you over dyed, bleached, Botox, crazy person pretending that you know that you're doing something sacred. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Mhm.
To me, that, and I know this makes me sound like a nutball too, you know, but that, I mean, that's, I have little granddaughters who love to go and pick herbs with me and make creams and potions
Beautiful.
and things, you know, yeah. And to me, all that stuff is sacred, more sacred than a lot of things. But you're taking these things and saying, oh yeah, I read this article on Google and now I'm gonna, you know,
Mhm.
I'm in charge of why, you know, I mean,
And now we can
Lori
control
took a
and
gun,
now we can control the elements. Right.
yeah, and the narrative, you know, okay, well, you know, that went down because we did the right thing. We combined the right elements and now Charles is dead.
Mhm.
Like, oh my gosh. No, Charles is dead because you're a wicked, evil, horrible person. You
Yeah.
know, the children are dead for no reason then. And I do think, by the way, that the way the kids died, and I caught a lot of flack about this once, the way that they killed the kids, I think has to do with this whole elements thing.
Okay.
And also, because JJ in the LDS church, if a child has developmental problems,
Mhm.
they used to say that, okay, well, you know, if you have a child with Down syndrome, for instance, well, it's he was given that because was so elect on the other side
Yes.
that he's given this thing in this life to protect him.
Yeah.
Did you ever
Okay.
hear that? Or
I've heard that they were elect in the past life.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Not
And
necessarily the second
so
part of that, but it makes sense
right,
to me.
yeah. So when I look at JJ's death, I think, okay, they would have seen him as an elect person now who became a zombie. I don't know how they fit that in. So they couldn't destroy his body the way they did Tylee's.
Oh.
That's a theory of mine,
Okay, interesting.
right?
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And when you listen to the way Melanie and them talked about Tylee, you know, she was annoyed by JJ, but I don't think she was as disgusted by him as she was Tylee, you know.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you got a lot of editing, huh? How
I
much of this
actually
chick?
the opposite, Bernadine.
Oh, you're sweet.
Everything you're saying is fascinating. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. This has been actually really enlightening for me too.
And here's the fence where Eldon would have walked. And here's the ditch.
Let's go back to Eldon Clawson for a second.
Hmm.
Did he and or his family? And I want to state this: as far as Eldon's family goes, Eldon's family is adamant that he died naturally, that he wasn't involved in anything with Chad, and some even say that it was maybe investigated his death. It was right around the time, though. It was when did he pass away, Eldon?
It wasn't it like September.
It was
It seems like
like
it
right
was
after JJ died,
after
wasn't it?
right. Yep. And the thing with Eldon is he believed he was the water master. So on our land we decided we were going to dig a pond. Oh my goodness, he about came unglued that we were stealing water. Now it was groundwater coming up from the water table or whatever. The water table was high there because we were right on the river. Or if somebody in the neighborhood took water too early on the ditch, or it was constant with Eldon. He was horrible with the water. And along Chad's fence, right where JJ was buried,
Ditch.
there was a ditch along that fence. And actually, Patsy and I talked about it quite a bit. Right by the fence, Eldon would have walked that ditch, and he noticed everything.
They probably thought, we have nothing to hide. If we do it out in broad daylight, nobody will even know. But they weren't counting on Eldon.
Once I had all these little chicks in my yard, and I got a call from him that some of my chicks were dead. He had come over, and there was a box, and the heat lamp had fallen and killed a couple of the chicks in the box. He knew everything that was going on everywhere. It wasn't even on his property, and he knew what was going on. He was a snooper. He was somebody who got into everybody's everything. There is no way he didn't know that Eldon or that Chad or Alex dug a hole there by the pond, because it's a little pond, and buried something there. Eldon would have known it.
So if someone chose to murder Eldon, there's a motive.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
We're here just barely west of Chad's. And there's where they found the kids. And here's the fence where Eldon would have walked. And here's the ditch with the water in it. Hasn't all come in yet from the winter. And this is where the original memorial fence was right down here. And then, when it was so crudely taken down in the middle of the night, Price's let us move it over here. And my niece came up with this cute, clever idea to come up with a rainbow in Tylee and JJ colors. And we freshened it up with flowers. Okay, and then we'll come over here. And here's the ditch, a culvert. And Eldon would have walked, he could have walked right here on the road, or even at times right next to that fence, right here where they buried the kids, out in the open.
And he was a fit person. He walked a lot. He had cattle. He was always walking. He was in good shape. His wife was a herbalist. We had several conversations about herbs, So they were very, into natural stuff,
And didn't he pass away outside too?
I think she did find him outside.
And it was a pulmonary embolism, which does happen. Blood clots do happen, and it is a way that people die suddenly. I do want to confirm that.
And with Alex, and possibly with, it's
I know it.
Interesting.
It is interesting, right? It definitely raises suspicions. I know that Chad asked one neighbor after Lori was arrested to consider mortgaging their house to help Chad get Lori out, and they did not. But that, to me, implies that he might have asked plenty of neighbors this. And as you point out, just about the Rexburg culture and the secrecy, and that's fascinating what your son said about thousands of people really being involved in this and people not speaking up because of shame. Would the Clawsons perhaps be believers of Chad's, fringe beliefs?
Oh yeah, I know neighbors. Yeah, for sure, they did. And I know other neighbors on that street who did. Like, were defending Chad up until the children were found, were defending Chad, and then were confronted at that point and didn't say anything. They just, no, I don't want to. My husband says you can give a name. I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's their story, But
Yeah.
but off the record, I'll tell you something else.
Okay.
But he was very, very supported by a lot of people, a lot of neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out if perhaps the Clawsons, they don't want it to be investigated, and they're so adamant. They've been angry about people like us who speculate. Could there be a reason they don't want people talking? Could they have been helping Chad unknowingly? I am not putting anything else on them. I do not think they murdered anyone. I don't think they committed a crime.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Do you think also the insurance? Didn't Eldon sell Chad Tammy's insurance policy?
I've heard that, but I don't know about that for sure. But I've also heard that part of Eldon's land was consideration for the tent city.
Oh, Eldon's land was.
Yeah, I've heard
Did he know
that as well. And I don't know for sure. But I was told that part of his land was under consideration for.
What about Sean Little Bear's sweat lodge? That was another thing that was supposedly there. Did you know about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know about that. I didn't ever see anything like that there. I used to go to a sweat lodge in Arco, but not
Sean Little Bear's.
I would have gone way closer if I'd known about that one, because it's a cool experience.
Eldon's land was considered a place for tent city.
That's what I was told, yes. So we'd have to, find out for sure, but I was told that it was part of the tent city.
Okay. Referring back to the secrecy and culture in Rexburg, you've brought a lot of insight with your opinions. As you say, other people will have different experiences and different opinions of Rexburg, but I really value what you saw, especially as an outsider who moved there and has lived many places. I really value your opinion. I do know, with that being said, I do want to share that while so many neighbors were defending Chad, there was one woman who was being very vocal and telling people this will not end well. It was Heather Daybell, that is Matt Daybell's wife. Right. And they were in the same church congregation or ward as Chad. And she told the bishop very clearly, this will not end well. This is not okay. And the bishop believed Chad. Right. I also think that goes to the whole protecting everyone at all costs and leaning towards men a little bit, as you say, it seems as if men were believed more than women. Yeah, and that's my opinion. That's my opinion.
No, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I was in that ward. Okay. When Eldon was tearing down the north fence, it was on Memorial Day weekend. A member of the bishopric, who was a Chad follower, I found out later, was helping Eldon tear down the fence.
Whoa.
And that was part of my whole, because it just blew up. I'm like, what do you think you're doing, right? So it's I agree with you. It's I think it's very, very patriarchal up there. I think that it's that way a lot in the church. It's a very patriarchal thing, which is, I think, one of the reasons that the Julie Rowe thing, again, is very interesting, and the Lori Vallow thing, is you have this goddess figure, and I think they were almost vying, actually, for position a little bit. to lead this new bunch, right? And only one person could win. So of course they're
so many people believed in this. So when Lori was the lead, it was real to many people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And for a lot of women, I can see why they'd be attracted to that, because finally it's not the men in charge all the time. It's not the men deciding everything all the time, because there's a lot of those groups that were coming up where the woman wanted the priesthood, and I'd heard quite a bit about that in Rexburg before I had moved away, was these little, and that to me, I don't get, because it's not about wanting the priesthood for me. It's like, why do you feel like that's something you need to have, to be able to be constructive in your life?
In the LDS faith, to explain what you're saying, boys are given the Aaronic priesthood at 12, and then they get the Melchizedek priesthood. It's not something women receive. They did in the early days of the church. Yeah.
Right, but our consolation prize is we can have children, right?
Right.
That's right. Their consolation prize is that, their consolation is that they get the priesthood, which you can go one way or the other.
So they get the priesthood and we get to go into labor. Wonderful.
That's right.
You are a champion, by the way, I want to say, because having 9 children, did you say?
Yes.
Bless your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I tell my kids all the time, you don't have to do this. They're like, Mom, I can only have 2. I'm like, good.
Yeah. But no, you bring up an interesting point, though. Chad did tell Lori she was a goddess, and she would lead the 144, and that she has the priesthood, has or will be given, and she gave blessings. So I think has. But I do want to say this, though, because Chad was absolutely a misogynist. I don't think that was about empowering women. I think that was actually choosing a woman based on her looks. Oh, she's hot to me. She's got dyed blonde hair, and she's petite and she's fit. And so thus she is a goddess. It wasn't based on anything about her being noble or, being like Joan of Arc or anything. It was about her sexual appeal.
And the long-awaited makeout session took place in that lobby. This was manifest in the mortal world to James and Elena through the scientific phenomenon known as Loin fire.
Loin fire.
I'm not sure what science they're referring to there, but maybe like biblical science.
Pretty basic, I think.
I wouldn't call him madly in love. I'd call him madly in lust.
Right. And Reed and I, we have hours to talk in the truck, and some of our conversations, I think, oh my gosh, we should have a YouTube, because I think we'd have people rolling on the ground.
Oh my gosh,
it's like,
do it.
Okay, you know what? No. I'll send them to you. So, you think about, the way a Mormon boy is raised. Okay. So you may not masturbate. You may not look at porn, you're good boy, you get to go on a mission, we want to keep you this way so you can go on a mission, you're going to be good and clean and nice and be a virgin when you get married, both of you preferably, all right? So there's going to be very limited sexual experience. And then you hit midlife crisis, and you have some men that go, and women, I'm sure, who go, what else is out there? Okay? And so this hot blonde, although I understand that some people think that Lori is hot,
He was loaded and hot.
His
loaded.
Love story.
So his word, a hot blonde. Yep.
Right, and it's like, and they'll listen to you and they'll believe the stuff that your wife might. I don't know what Tammy thought about his stuff. But from what I've heard on your show and stuff, maybe she wasn't as enamored with Chad as Lori was enamored with his stuff, right? In that case, being a Chad, you're like, oh yeah, you're gonna have sex this way? You bet. Oh, this is different. I've got this great body. The whole where she was saying, you have to have sex 3 times a day, she said somewhere to something, it's like, oh my goodness, is this like fueling a man's dream midlife crisis or what?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
And
right.
it was a fantasy, like the cheerleader, you know, the most perfect body. That's the way what he said in those texts to her. Their love story was very
Yeah.
much about lust, you know.
Right.
In that
Yeah.
famous text novel that he wrote her, it
Yeah.
wasn't about who she was on the inside. It was about lust. He mentioned her intelligence once, but it
Yeah.
was very lustful, right?
Yeah.
You are
Yeah.
a goddess because you are hot and your body
Yeah.
is the perfect dimensions. You said that Rexburg is secret and things get swept under the rug and people cover for people. I
Hmm.
have been consistently and constantly fascinated with the fact that they did not perform an autopsy on a 49-year-old woman and just quickly called it natural. And especially because there were concerns going on in Arizona at that time. Much had already happened. The children were missing. There was word of cult activity. It wasn't like this was the first thing. And someone quickly decided, natural, let's go. I just want your opinions on that. Do you think that this was just genuinely, oh, okay, or do you think someone was covering for someone? I mean, what was that?
So, Miss Dye showed up, and the family said they don't want an autopsy, therefore the coroner just signed off then and there, and then the funeral home took Miss Daybell? Is that how that works?
Yes, that's pretty much how it works. So unless, and then they went to the funeral home, and I'm not aware if Brenda went to the funeral home with. I don't believe so. I can look in the activity and see when they, when she cleared versus, because I know that my deputy went to the funeral home. So I'm not exactly sure, but I can look at the.
Well, I know, and you said earlier there was an incident report, but was there a physical police report to it?
Let's see. So usually I can look at. I don't think that there was a police report done.
You know what? I know Brenda Dye from Island Park. Okay. I had restaurants in Island Park. And I know other people that have gone through the program and become. My college professor was actually the coroner in Rexburg. So when Brenda became the coroner for Fremont County, I was surprised because other than being an EMT, I thought a coroner did a whole lot more than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at the way that people are crying at a funeral. It's not at a funeral, next to the bed with the dead body, and Chad saying this and that. I can see them just saying, "Oh yeah, she just died of natural causes," and sweeping. It's just a convenient thing. Somebody who isn't a trained coroner, like some of the people that I've listened to. I don't know if they're on your show or somebody else's. The things that they normally do as a coroner. There was not that level of training for the Fremont County coroner.
So you
No,
don't think it was anything nefarious? It was just sort of.
no. Yeah, I think that I don't know how much in Island Park, the culture up there was not the same as the Rexburg culture. The food storage thing, it's a very different place, Island Park, than down in the valley, and so I don't think it was Brenda hiding things because of what Chad and Lori had been up to. I think it was just dumb,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, because her husband was actually our bishop up there. They were a good family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that information and knowledge about her. The children, Tammy's children. I'm going to call them Tammy's children.
Yeah.
What were they like? Did you enjoy them? They're clearly in your children's lives a lot. And
yeah, like I said, Mark was the one that I had more interaction with than the others. The others were kind of, I'd go stop in at an event and chat with Leah for a minute because she was standing next to my son, or I didn't, But, and so it was more the things that my kids would say, but Mark, what a sweet, gentle kid, and he was on his mission, when his mom died, and Gabriel, my youngest, the one who's on a mission right now, he was in contact with Mark. I'd reached out to Mark and I hadn't heard anything back. And I thought, well, when you're on a mission, there's only certain people that you can communicate with. But he was communicating with Gabriel, and it was hard, and he was confused. He decided to stay out. When he came back, I know that the last I talked to Gabriel, and I know he's moved on. He actually went to Alaska for a while, just to try and get away from everything that was going on,
Mark
and
did?
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And I listened to the kids interview, and I'm like, it's annoying, but I can see what else are they supposed to do until it's proved to them that their dad isn't that way. I can see why they would choose what they did,
Right.
I think Emma and Garth drank more of the Kool-Aid than the others, frankly. But yeah.
Okay. I have talked to one person who used to work with Mark, and I do want to share that person said he was an incredibly hard worker.
Yeah.
So that was
I'm not
their,
surprised.
yeah, that was what they
Yeah.
saw in him. So he must have also gotten that from Tammy because she was an incredibly hard worker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, and how happy I am to hear that he's doing well and that he was able to get away. And thank you. I've always felt really bad for him. As you said, he was on his mission, and then he had to come home early from his mission because of COVID. I hope all of these children will be able to heal.
Eldon he could have walked right here on the road, or even at times right next to that fence, right here where they buried the kids, out in the open, in broad daylight. They probably thought, we have nothing to hide. If we do it out in broad daylight, nobody will even know. But they weren't counting on Eldon.
I contacted Eldon Clawson's family before publishing this interview. I am told that information about Eldon stated in this interview by the former neighbor is false. Shirley Clawson requested I reach out to the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, as they are aware of everything involved in Eldon's death and would be the best source of accurate information. Shirley tells me that Fremont County has told her they see no connection between Eldon's death and Chad Daybell. And I do have on good authority that law enforcement sees no connection between the Chad Daybell case and the sudden death of Eldon. When I reached out to the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, they told me at this time they are not making a statement. Lauren Matthias, Hidden True Crime.